Have you ever been told something or read something that was so confusing it just didn't make any sense? How about that time when you were talking with someone who just wasn't getting what you were trying to communicate? It's frustrating when there's a barrier that prevents us from effectively communicating, whether it was our fault or not. Barriers to effective communication can, have, and will lead to misunderstanding, confusion, arguments, and loss of valuable resources that include your money, time, relationships, and even lives. The first and most understandable barrier to effective communication is one that is completely out of your control, and that is a language barrier. There are supposedly 7,139 different languages being used on our planet, which means the chances are good that you will eventually encounter someone who doesn't speak your language. This obviously will make communicating with them much more difficult, if not impossible. Even the use of nonverbal communication, such as gestures and body language, might not help, since their shared meaning and use varies from culture to culture. When you meet someone who's still learning your language, show patience and be respectful, as they may have a strong and difficult to understand accent. Until you learn how to tune in and really listen to what someone's saying, communication can be a real challenge. Then there is the issue of working out cultural meanings, of trying to interpret analogies and differences in how something is described. The quickest fix to overcome a language barrier is to have a personal translator there with you, but that's not always possible or practical. The next best option is to have a translation device handy, like the few I have listed in the description, or an app on your cell that will translate live speech as well as reading menus, ingredients on packaged foods, signs, and even handwriting. Just to let you know, if you do click on any of the Amazon affiliate links and purchase any of the products, I do receive a small commission, but don't worry, it won't make anything cost extra from the published price. The second barrier to effective communication is all on you, and that's your ability to actively listen instead of just hearing. Hearing is passive and requires no thought or action. Listening is an active process that is purposeful and intentional, and is one of the most difficult forms of communication to master, as it requires you to observe facial expressions, maintain good eye contact, read and interpret body language, and be able to appreciate what the tone of someone's voice is expressing. When you use active listening effectively, you can get someone to open up about what they really mean, to resolve conflicts, and to build trust by showing a genuine interest in the conversation and the person. Active listening requires full concentration. That means you're not checking your cell phone or your smartwatch. You're focusing intently on the person's overall presence and what is being communicated. Active listening also helps you to know when to appropriately respond in a conversation, to keep it going, or when to end it. The more you use and practice active listening, you'll find that your likability and success in dealing with and being appreciated by people across a wider range of contexts will be much more satisfying. The third barrier to effective communication is contextual communication. Contextual communication happens between people who are from different cultures, a different age group, a higher or lower technical skill level, doctors, lawyers, accountants, different departments at work, and anyone who believes or thinks differently than you do. In cross-cultural communication exchanges, there will most likely be different words and phrases used that you may not be aware of or are just not comfortable using. To overcome contextual communication barriers, be aware of where you are and who you're communicating with. Even when you speak the same language, you may not be able to fully comprehend what's being said and what it means. Keep an open mind and realize that there are differences between you and the person you're talking with. The best way to deal with contextual communication situations is don't be afraid to ask questions to help clarify what someone else is saying, especially when you're communicating with someone whose role and hierarchy and status is at a different level from your own. The fourth barrier to effective communication deals with hierarchy and the roles people have. For instance, the president of a large company may never even talk with the lowest paid people on the payroll, but if they did, the conversation may be friendlier than a mid-level manager who feels the need to demonstrate their superiority over their subordinates out of the need to maintain power and control. Unfortunately, there are supervisors and managers who establish a purposeful communication gap with their subordinates to create a hierarchical barrier by acting aloof and distancing themselves to maintain a perceived social gap in status, while others maintain a friendlier environment that involves mutual respect and empathy. When social norms, along with other emotions such as jealousy, arrogance, and the need to dominate over others occurs, communication can be very difficult and can lead to conflict and aggression. The best way to resolve role and hierarchy differences is to have empathy. Be accepting that someone is at a different level than you are. And if you're in a superior role, show some humility that can go a long way towards reducing animosity, mistrust, and a lack of communication. If you are dealing with a superior, be direct, to the point without being arrogant or intrusive while respecting their rank in the hierarchy system. The fifth barrier to effective communication deals with implied versus explicit messaging. Implied messages are not clear and concise and can lead someone to read between the lines in what is said or written and come up with a completely different meaning. To overcome this barrier does take practice and thought about how you compose a message and how you interpret messages. By using explicit, straightforward, specific, and deliberate content will leave little to no room for guessing, misinterpretation, and miscommunication. Just don't confuse explicit as a demand that can often alienate and distance people you're trying to communicate with. To be a stronger communicator, don't shy away from being explicit by saying exactly what you mean, but do it in a polite and direct way with words that are meaningful. The sixth barrier to effective communication is the choice of words we use or don't use to convey the proper meaning. When someone uses buzzwords, acronyms, jargon, or legalese type words in a message, is it to obfuscate the meaning of the message or just talk over someone's head to show how supercilious they are? To be better understood, use plain language or at least quickly explain what the code word or the acronym or the legalese word means to someone who may not be in the know to what it means. Within your own circle of friends, you may use words and phrases that are never repeated anywhere else, and, if uttered in public or in the wrong situation, could draw immediate retribution, penalties, and consequences, depending on who is present or sees that viral video. The best way to overcome the communication barrier of having a narrow vocabulary is to learn at least 1 to 3 words a week, and then practice using them as often as possible in your conversations, presentations, writings, speeches, and videos. Speaking of videos, if you think I'm providing you with solid information on how to overcome barriers to communication, you can communicate to me and the YouTube algorithm that you like this content and show us that it's worth sharing with more people by tapping that thumbs up. Thanks. I truly appreciate it. The seventh barrier to effective communication is choosing the wrong medium or method for how you send your message. This simply means that if you send an email to someone who never checks their email and only communicates through Twitter or texts, your message will go unseen and unread. There are so many choices on how to send a message. And to be honest, there isn't one perfect communication channel. Even though technology can deliver our messages much faster with minimal words and symbols, it still lacks the ability to read someone's body language, hear the tone of their voice, and see their facial expression that can quickly clarify a message or cause messages to be misinterpreted and lead someone to making assumptions that can and will lead to miscommunication and possible conflict. The solution is to simply communicate with people through different mediums that you know they will receive and be able to respond back to you and are willing to do so. But don't assume that. The eighth barrier to effective communication is when assumptions are used to interpret a message. Don't assume anything. In case you've never heard the analogy, if you assume something, you make an ass of you and me. Well, let's just say that's true. And do not assume anything other than that. The best way to avoid assumptions is to use complete, to the point, and accurate statements. Don't assume someone else will get what you're saying just because they know you. Avoid the conflict and the bad things that can happen when you allow for an open interpretation of a message. If you receive a message that's incomplete, instead of assuming what the meaning is, ask questions to confirm the information, just like in active listening. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you're not sure, go ahead and write out your question in the comments section, and I will answer back. See how that works? The ninth barrier to effective communication is not providing enough information or using too much information. If you are trying to learn how to do something and are only given part of the instructions, and it's something new to you, how are you going to understand what you're supposed to do to complete it? For instance, when you watch a video to learn how to make a secret recipe sauce from scratch, and the presenter doesn't tell you what the ingredients are, but only shows you how to mix them together, that doesn't work very well. And then there is the case of being given too much information, causing you to become confused as to what the message was. How many times have you received an email that starts with, "I know that this is a lot of information, but," I'm already scrolling through paragraphs of content and skipping to the last sentence. You do that too, don't you? The quick fix is this. Make sure to be accurate in your communications by including enough information in a message to be unquestionable, but don't overload the message with too much unneeded and unnecessary and distracting information. The 10th barrier to effective communication is how fast or slow the message is delivered. When we're happy and excited or nervous, we tend to speed up our pace of speech. And when we're sad or angry, we tend to slow down. Of course, when someone is angry, their pace of speech can fly off the charts too. Finding the right pace of delivery can be tricky for many speakers, depending on age, situation, topic, emotional state, and the relationship with who you're speaking with. Sometimes it's good to go fast, as long as you're clear, and pause just long enough to take a breath at the end of each sentence. That way you won't end up with a run-on paragraph. Pauses should be no more than 2 seconds, and should be used with great care, depending on the situation, so you don't lose someone's attention. Longer pauses can and should be used when waiting for an answer after you ask a question, as long as the listener knows it was a question. That's why the use and misuse of your voice is the 11th barrier to effective communication. When we hear someone speaking, we can often interpret how that person is feeling and what their state of mind is based on their volume, tone, and intonation of their voice. Intonation or inflection, that's the pitch of the ups and downs of your voice, can keep someone from falling into a trance and losing interest in what's being said. To keep and maintain someone's attention and interest, start thinking of your voice as a musical instrument that has a wide range of intonation capabilities that can create a unique experience in your conversations. Here are a few tips to follow on how to use intonation the right way. First, don't get stuck in a sing-song, up and down pattern that is not only monotonous to hear, but it's nauseating to listen to. When asking a question, there should be a natural rise in intonation, and when making a statement, generally the intonation should fall. It all depends on your environment, the situation, and who you're speaking with. Good? Good. When intonation is used incorrectly, it can create confusion and even bring into question the confidence, credibility, and believability of the speaker. And to close out the 12 barriers to effective communication is one that you should be very aware of and not fall victim to, and that is closed-mindedness. When someone closes their mind off to what is being said and won't engage in a conversation out of how they feel about a topic, there is no conversation, only a lecture. To find out if someone even wants to hear your opinion about a topic, start by asking a question to gauge their interest. If they tell or show you through facial expression or body language that they're not interested, save yourself the time and energy. When dealing with closed-minded people, remember to be empathetic about how you would feel if someone came up to you and started blathering on about a topic that you absolutely do not want to hear or talk about. Be courteous, direct, and firm, and just say, "That is not something I care to discuss with you." What I care to discuss with you is that the bottom line to overcoming barriers in communication is to be aware that they exist and that you do have some control over how to work through some of them, and accept the fact that some barriers are beyond your control, and that's okay. Just walk away. To learn more about how to become an effective communicator, watch this video next. Remember that my goal is that your success is the goal of becoming a stronger and more masterful communicator. I'll see you online soon.